Rome had sent 2 legions into Armenia to impose its will. Their commander promised Nero a swift victory. Instead, the roads behind them closed, cavalry gathered across the plain, and the men who had marched in as conquerors were soon begging for permission to leave. This is how Rome walked into the trap at Rhandeia. In the year 62, Armenia was not merely another kingdom on Rome's eastern frontier, it was the hinge between 2 worlds. To the west stood the Roman Empire, to the east Parthia. Whoever controlled the Armenian throne gained influence over the roads of the Caucasus, the approaches to Anatolia, and the high ground above northern Mesopotamia. The Armenian crown was therefore never just a crown, it was a declaration of which empire held the advantage. The Parthian king Vologases had placed his brother Tiridates on that throne. Emperor Nero answered by sending one of Rome's finest commanders, Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo. Corbulo entered Armenia in 58 with a large, carefully prepared army. He captured Artaxata, forced Tigranocerta to submit, and replaced Tiridates with Rome's own candidate, Teodranes. For a moment, the eastern settlement appeared complete. Rome had its king, Nero had his victory, and Corbulo had demonstrated what discipline, preparation, and patience could achieve. But Tigranes then raided Adiabene, a kingdom protected by Parthia. Vologases could no longer accept the humiliation. Before his assembled nobles, he placed the diadem once more upon Tiridates' head, and committed Parthian power to restoring him. The struggle for Armenia was about to begin again. Only this time, Corbulo would not command the Roman invasion. Rome divided the eastern command. Corbulo remained in Syria, while Lucius Caecilius Paetus received responsibility for Armenia. Paetus inherited the 4th Scythica, the 12th Fulminata, the 5th Macedonica, and auxiliaries drawn from across Rome's eastern provinces. It was a formidable force on paper. But Paetus did not want to continue Corbulo's cautious war, he wanted to eclipse it. He dismissed Corbulo's achievements as victories without blood or plunder. He boasted that he would not leave Armenia with the empty shadow of a friendly king. He would impose tribute, Roman law, and direct obedience. With the 4th and 12th legions, Paetus crossed the Euphrates and marched into Armenia. His winter camp was not fully fortified, its grain supply was not secure, winter itself was approaching. Still, he drove the army across the Taurus Mountains, seized several forts, and sent columns into districts he could not hope to hold. The first movements looked successful, prisoners and plunder came back to camp, resistance appeared scattered. Then the captured supplies began to spoil. The distances grew longer, the weather closed in. Tiridates avoided the kind of decisive encounter the Romans wanted, while mounted forces watched the roads and waited. Paetus nevertheless wrote to Nero, as though the campaign had already been won. His message was grand, confident, and almost empty of facts. Beyond the Roman outposts, Vologases was concentrating a far more dangerous answer. The warning reached Paetus too late. Vologases was advancing in strength. The Roman commander had left the 5th Macedonica far away in Pontus. He had weakened the remaining legions by granting leave indiscriminately, and instead of concentrating what remained, he divided it again. 3,000 selected infantry were sent to hold a nearby ridge of the Taurus. Pannonian cavalry occupied part of the plain. Another cohort guarded Paetus's wife and son at the fortress of Arsamosata. Each position looked defensible on its own. Together, they formed an army waiting to be defeated in pieces. Vologases did not offer the Romans the clean battle they expected. His mounted troops threatened the cavalry on the plain, isolated the ridge, and attacked wherever Roman units could not support one another. The force on the heights collapsed. Only the centurion Tarquitius Crescens continued to resist from a tower, leading repeated sallies until volleys of burning missiles overwhelmed him. The survivors carried more than wounds back to the main camp. They carried stories of endless horsemen, of roads already cut, and of an enemy moving faster than any Roman response. Fear reached the camp before the full Parthian army did. Paetus briefly marched his legions out, as though he intended to fight. A reconnaissance party was struck down. He turned back. Soon the same commander who had promised to administer a conquered Armenia was sending desperate messages to Corbulo, asking him to save the eagles and what remained of Rome's honor. Corbulo began a forced march from Syria, with a relief column and camels loaded with grain. At Rhandeia, meanwhile, Armenian and Parthian forces pressed closer to the Roman entrenchments. They attacked the perimeter, threatened the nearby fortress, and repeatedly tried to draw the legions into the open. The Romans would barely leave their tents. The trap was no longer closing. It had closed. Paetus now faced the decision he had spent the entire campaign pretending would never come. He could hold the camp and wait for Corbulo, or he could bargain for the survival of his army. He chose to bargain. The terms stripped away every claim Rome had made during the invasion. The legions would leave Armenia. Roman forts and supplies would be surrendered. Until Nero answered the peace proposals, no Roman force was to return. Before the withdrawal had even begun, Armenian and Parthian troops entered the Roman lines. They reclaimed captured animals and slaves, took clothing, and removed weapons from soldiers too cowed to resist. Vologases ordered the captured arms and the bodies of the dead piled together as proof of victory. Later Roman accounts spoke of the legions being sent beneath a yoke. Whether that particular humiliation occurred is uncertain. The rest was humiliating enough. Paetus abandoned the camp and covered roughly 40 miles in a single day. Wounded men were left along the road. When the fugitives finally met Corbulo near the Euphrates, hardened Roman soldiers wept at the sight of one another. The bitterest detail came afterward. The camp had not been out of grain. The enemy was reportedly running short of fodder, and Corbulo was only 3 days away. Rhandeia was not the destruction of 2 Roman legions. It was something more politically damaging, a surrender that may not have been necessary. Rome returned in strength the following year, but even Corbulo recognized that Armenia could not be held indefinitely at an acceptable cost. A compromise followed. Tiridates would rule Armenia as an Arsacid king, but he would receive his crown from Nero. Rome preserved the ceremony. Parthia preserved the dynasty. Armenia remained between them, governed by neither empire as completely as either desired. The legions at Rhandeia were not defeated by one miraculous charge. They were defeated by distance, divided forces, mobile enemies, failing confidence, and a commander whose certainty survived long after his judgment had failed.